In this lesson, we're going to be setting up stars components for your web page. So bringing in a JavaScript library that gives you the ability to create these star components that you can use within your web page. So they are dependent on some styling for some of the style for these stars. And the rest of it is done with JavaScript. So if you want to bring the component in, all you have to do is create a div with a class of stars, and the JavaScript will take care of the rest. And they do all work independently. Whenever you click it, it tracks the star rating and keeps the stars as orange. Whenever you're hovering over it, the stars will go yellow. So you can always update any one of these ratings as they're all working independently. So this is all going to be done with JavaScript. We're going to dynamically build these star containers, all using JavaScript, and then create the interaction as well with JavaScript. So adding the ability to create the elements, adding the color, adding the yellow color, adding the orange color as the user interacts with the star elements. So that's all coming up in this lesson. Go ahead and open up your editor. Let's create a file. I'm calling mine star.html, and I've filled out the basics for the HTML page. So including having a div where we're going to output, and then we're going to link to a JavaScript file, and we'll just call this star.js, and then create a brand new file, save it within the same directory as star.js. So that gives us the JavaScript file to work with. And what we want to do is we want to create a star area within the output. So we can just call this output, or we'll just call it stars with a class of stars, and then we can apply all of the styling to that element. And actually we're going to do it as an unordered list, and we'll generate all of the interactive stars using JavaScript. So this is all you're going to have to include within your HTML code in order to create the star project. And then going over to the JavaScript code, let's apply and create some elements. So this is going to be the main container using the document query selector. Let's select the element with a class of star. So that will select the main class there where we've got the stars class. And I'm actually going to do this as a div. And the reason is that we'll also create an output area. So this is just going to be the main holder for the stars. And we're selecting that using the main class. And then within there, I want to add in an output class. So using the document create element, and the element that we want to create is going to be a div. I'm actually going to recreate the function that will just be called create elements. So it will take in the two parameters, element type and parent. So this will also give us a way to easily add content, and then also the class that we want to add into it. So create an element using the document create element method, and the element that we're creating is whatever type has been passed in. For the element class list add, and we're adding the my class value to it, which is a string value. And then for the parent, append the element to the parent, and then lastly we return back the element. So that gives us a function that we can create elements. We pass in the parameters. So this is going into main. This is a div, and the class that we're going to be setting up is just going to be main, or we'll just call it actually output. So this is where we can have the output message content. And also want to create the unordered list, stars UL for the unordered list, and we'll use the same function to create the unordered list. So being attached to main, it's going to be an unordered list, and this is where we're going to generate our stars. So this one can have a class of stars for the parent. So let's see what we've got so far on the page. We should generate those elements within the element of stars, and actually I'll give it a different class there. How about we just do main for that? So that will add in a class of main for the main unordered list container. So now we have to add in the stars elements. which are all list items. So we want to add in 4 stars, and we'll loop while x is less than 5, increment x by 1. So we want to add all of the stars with a class of star. So give it a name of star, and we'll create an element that we're going to append to the stars unordered list. And these are all going to be list items, and they'll all have a class of star. And then for the star, we'll set the text content. Actually, it should be inner HTML. And the inner HTML for the star is going to be the character code, the HTML character code for the star. So that gives us the stars there to interact with. And we've added a class of stars. So taking a look at the HTML. So there's our unordered list and star. So let's also apply some styling to it so it looks more. We'll get rid of the list styling. And so this is going to be contained within stars. So the element with a class of stars and the unordered lists that are within there. So like setting the list style type and set that to none, so that will get rid of the bullet points on the unordered list. So you can see we got rid of those. And let's remove out any default padding that it might have. So that will move it over to the left. The stars themselves, we'll set a font size for those to 2EM. Let's add in a color for the star. So initially we want it to be a gray color until they're actually clicked, and then update the display to inline block so that they're stacked horizontally. So that gives us the stars to interact with. And for the output area, so this is where we can have messaging to the user. So let's do a background color so we can distinguish it. And this can also be kind of a grayish color. I'll do the same color as the stars, and we'll do a border. And of course you can update the styling to suit whatever purposes for the styling, to whatever customized needs you need. Also, let's do a margin, so top and bottom, and 0 for left and right, and then some padding of 10 pixels. So we also want to have the option to add some color to the stars. So that will just be the font color of yellow. And then also let's do one for orange. So we can easily add colors to the stars simply by updating and adding and removing classes. So that gives us our output area, our stars there. So everything is ready to go with the JavaScript. So we want to make these stars interactive. So depending on the mouse moves, we want to track the star content. And as we're creating these star elements, this is where we can add the different values to the stars. So let's take the star object, and to the star, we'll set up a value to that object. And that object value is going to be the rating for the star, which will be a value of x plus 1. So we're starting at 0, so that means that each one of these stars, the first one is going to be worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we know what kind of value for the star there is. So I want to add several event listeners to the star itself. So you can add multiple event listeners within an array type format. So I'm going to have an event listener for mouse over, mouse out, or we could just write each one of the event listeners. But this way we can capture 3 event listeners, and using for each, we'll loop through the elements and then we'll apply the event listeners accordingly to the element. So for the star, let's add event listener. And the event listener that we're adding is going to be whatever we've got for the element. So that's coming from this array where we've got mouse over, mouse out, and mouse click. And they're all going to trigger the same function, which is the star rate. And then we'll figure out what type of event got triggered, whether it's the click or the mouse over within the star rate function. So let's set that one up as well. So this is just another way to create multiple event listeners on the element. So within the star rate itself, we're passing over the event object, and we can console log the event type. So let's see what happens so far. So whenever we're over out, we're adding in the event type there. And then if we click on it, we're getting those event types. So we're tracking the event types. So all of those event listeners are added to each one of the stars, and then we're able to track those event types. And for the star value as well, so E target, and then we can get the star value. So we can pass it that way. As we set the star value over here, so we can get the star value. So we know which star value is being passed through. So if the element is going to be a click, then we can update the star value and add a class to it. So we'll track the event type within the E type value. And that's the same value that we're logging out there. So if the event type equals a click event, and just make sure that we're doing it as it's case sensitive. So clear that and click. So make sure that that's all lowercase there. So if the event type is a click, then that means that we've had a rating for the star. So we want to capture that and set the color for all of the stars within this container object. And for the output element, so we'll output and update the inner HTML of this element. I'm using the backticks, so the template literals. So you rated this, and then whatever the star value is that we're rating it, and that's going to be this value here. So you rated this whatever star value. So you rated 3 stars, you rated 4 stars, you rated 5 stars. And of course we can apply styling as needed as well. So let's wrap that. And so now what we want to do as well is we want to color the stars. So wherever it's been clicked, what we want to do is we want to set the star value and select all of the star elements and update that value to those star elements. So this means that we need to go back out to the parent, to the unordered list, and select that parent element. So we've got the event target element, and we want to get the parent of it. And this is in case we have more than one star, so that it works completely independently on each one of the parent elements. And I'm actually going to shrink down the margin there a bit as well. And we do need to make one adjustment in order to pick up all of them. And then we'll have to select the output and the main area accordingly. So this is going to contain all of the stars, containers. So all of the star containers. And then take star containers, and we're going to loop through each one of the star containers. And for those, we're going to create the elements within them. So now we no longer have a parent for output or for the stars unordered list, but we're only using the stars unordered list there, but we're using the output outside of that. So we need to once again select the parent in order to define the output element. So let's comment this out for a second and select the parent. So this is going to be the E target. And selecting the closest unordered list, and then we'll console log the current parent. And I'll get rid of some of these console messages so that we have a little bit less confusion in there. So it looks like we threw an error already. That main is not being referenced properly. And that's because we need to attach it to the element and to the element, whatever that parent element is. And I need to update this as well. So I'm using the same variable name. So it looks like we do have 2 star areas, and let's clear that So it is selecting whatever the parent is for that element. And if I go over that one, so it is selecting the parent properly. So that means that from that parent, we can do an event list and do a query for output. So output and equal output to the parent element. So using a query selector, select the value of the element with a class of output. And when we look at the source code, the output is actually outside of the unordered list. So we have to go up to the closest parent that has a class of stars. So this will allow us to search within that parent for the output area and then output whatever we've rated the star. So now that's working, and we can easily add some more star components on the page as needed. We're just adding in that one, and they're all going to work independently. So we still need to apply some styling to the stars. And we can do that as well because we know which star has been rated because we know the value that has been rated. So this is the star value for the rating. And we can loop through and we can update all of the star values with that same yellow class. So let's loop through all of the stars, and we'll select all of the stars. I'll just call it current stars to avoid any confusion. And then for this one as well, the parent and the query selector, we're selecting all of the relevant elements. So we want to select all of the elements with a class of star. So it's a class of star. And then we can loop through all of those relevant elements and apply the color to it. So current stars. And this is only if it's been clicked. So we want to run and do an update of that element for the clicked element. So let's create a function for that. And so whenever it gets clicked, we'll update the star value for it. So we'll add a color, which is adding the orange to whatever the current stars is. And this is going to require some parameters. So we want to get the current stars, pass that into the object. So it's passing in the list of whatever the current stars is. We also want to get the eTarget star value. So we know how many stars we want to color from that list. And let's update those elements with that star color. So current stars for each, we're going to list through each one of the stars. And we'll also track the index value as we're looping through. And if the index value, so we have the value of val, and let's do a quick one within the console. So that tells us what the current value is. And that's a number, so we can check to see if index is less than the star value. Then we're going to select the current element. So that's the star class list, and we'll add the class of orange to it. Otherwise, we're going to remove the class of orange from it. I'll see what that looks like. So if we're hovering over, so we only want the class of orange to stay. We don't want it as we're hovering over. So I want to apply some different styling of yellow if we're just hovering over it. So if we're mouse over, and I'll move up the selection of all of the current stars, and we only want to add the color if we've got a click. So that will add the orange color if we have a click. And if we want to have that hovering effect where it's changing, we can create another function for that. So the yellow will add and remove as the element moves across. We'll pass in those same values and update the function. It's going to be almost the same as the add color. So whatever the current stars is for the value, and that can be yellow. So now as I'm hovering over, it's adding that yellow color to the star. It's only when I click it that the rating actually gets applied and it gets saved. So that's how you can set up a project that's going to track stars and star ratings within your web page.